My daughter-in-law came to me trembling. She held my son's shirt in her hands like proof of a murder. On the collar, a red lipstick stain. I thought it would be hers, or maybe mine by accident. But when I looked closer, I saw something that froze me completely. The lipstick had a name carved into its side. Clara. I haven't heard that name in 40 years. And the last time I saw it, it was engraved on a coffin. My daughter-in-law thought she'd caught her husband cheating. She didn't know. She just opened a grave that was supposed to stay closed. And the woman behind that lipstick was someone who should have been dead. My daughter-in-law came into the kitchen before sunrise, still in her robe, eyes red from crying. She didn't say good morning. She just held up my son's white shirt, trembling, accusing. There it was. A faint red smear on the collar, small but loud enough to ruin peace. She whispered, "It's not my shade." Then she dropped the shirt on the table like a verdict and walked away. I stood there for a long time, staring at that stain. It wasn't just color, it was memory. The same shade of red I'd worn in my 20s. The same shade that belonged to someone I used to call my sister, Clara. Back then we shared everything, clothes, secrets, even dreams. Until the day we shared a man. I told myself she was gone forever, that the past was buried deep. But that morning, the color on my son's collar whispered her name louder than memory ever could. I asked him where he'd been the night before. He smiled, the kind of smile men use when they've practiced lying. Work dinner, he said. But the scent on his shirt wasn't food or perfume. It was old, sweet and familiar, like the ghosts of a perfume no one sells anymore. I wanted to believe him. God knows I tried. But lies have a way of wearing your loved one's face. And I could already see Clara's shadow standing right behind his. I brewed coffee I didn't want and kept the stained collar on the table like a witness who might change its story if I blinked. The house was too quiet. Quiet turns a thought into a siren. Clara. Her name wasn't just a memory to me. It was a room I never went into with the lights on. We were girls together once. The kind of girls who borrow each other's clothes and call it destiny. She had a laugh that made waiters look twice and a way of walking into a room like she'd left something golden there yesterday and had come back to collect it. On me, red lipstick looked like bravery. On her, it looked like the truth remembering itself. We bought that shade on a hot afternoon when the ceiling fans at Cardell's pharmacy only pushed the heat around. The clerk said the color was limited, the sort of red men return wallets for, he joked. And Clara leaned into the counter and said, "Then we should have two." She paid for both and slid one toward me like a pact. I kept mine in my purse for years, even after the company stopped making it. She had her name engraved on the cap in thin cursive, a private crown. I asked her why. She said, "So nothing walks away from me again." I learned later what she meant by again. When you're young, you think love is a house you can build with sheer insistence. By the time we figured out we were painting the same walls for the same man, the paint was already dry. We told ourselves we were grown. We told ourselves a dozen things clever people say to make betrayal sound like an accident. Then the accident came for real. Or what passed for one. A bad curve on a wet road, a guardrail, a late-night call. I stood at the service with a dress too black and a heart too loud. And I watched the light fall across a coffin I wasn't allowed to cry over the way I wanted. Someone had placed her lipstick in the satin near her hand, tucked like a love note. I remember thinking, that's mercy. No woman should leave this world without her color. The brand folded a few years later. The shade disappeared from shelves and from the mouths of women who never knew what it did to a room. I stopped wearing red. It felt like wandering into a story that didn't belong to me anymore. So when I saw that smear on my son's collar, it wasn't just that I recognized the color. It was that I recognized the promise behind it, the old selfishness that had once taught me how soft the word mine can be when it comes out of the wrong mouth. I lifted the shirt again, turned the fabric to the light, and looked for the thing that had frozen me, the thing I hadn't told my daughter-in-law in that first breath. Along the faint red edge, there had been a trace of shimmer from the cap. And on that cap, for the smallest second before the stain smeared it dull, I saw a sliver of a name. Not printed. Carved. Clara. Not a coincidence, my mind said. Coincidences don't sign their names. I opened the drawer where I keep old manuals and empty batteries, and the kind of instructions married people stop reading because they think they've lived enough to improvise. I found the magnifying glass my husband once used when the newspaper shrank the words, and I held it over the cap. The metal had been rubbed nearly smooth by pockets and heat and time, but there it was, the tail of an R, the stubborn loop of an A. It could have been anything. It was not anything. I should have thrown it out, made a scene, phoned a friend to sit at the table with me and say the things friends say when the bad news wears your child's face. Instead, I did what I always do when the polite world starts to tilt. I made a list. Where did the lipstick come from? Who has it now? How did the name survive? Why now? Why us? I tried the internet first, because even ghosts leave footprints in fresh snow if you know where to look. The brand's old site redirected to a perfume warehouse with pop-ups that promised youth for a fee. A forum thread from years ago mourned discontinued shades with the seriousness people reserve for losses that don't attempt to bury you. An eBay listing flashed a tube of my color with a price that made grief look cheap. The engraving was different. No name. Just a pattern of vines meant to fool the eye at a distance. Then a boutique page. Barely there, like a shop that only opens on odd afternoons. Ciel designs. Lipsticks inspired by classics, hand-poured, engraved on request. The example photograph was a red I could have named with my eyes closed. The sample engraving read Lena in the same thin cursive Cardell's had used for special orders back when cash registers chimed. I clicked on About. A single line. Vintage beauty, modern truth. No names, no faces, no address. Just an email with a West County domain that still remembered dial-up in its bones. Zeal Designs. Clara's initials. Or a coincidence dressing itself up as a sign. I wanted to close the laptop and call my son into the kitchen and shake the truth out of him like you shake sand out of a beach towel. I pictured his face when he was 10, the way he'd insist he hadn't eaten the cookies we both smelled on his breath. He lies like a gentle person does, by believing the story he's telling until the world refuses to join him. When he was little, that meant I let him keep his dignity over small sweets. What do you let a man keep when the sweet thing in question is someone else's mouth? My daughter-in-law came back down the hall and sat in the doorway like a woman who has already watched a house burn and is deciding whether to go inside anyway. Do you believe me? She asked without looking up. I believe the stain, I said. It was the most honest answer I had. She nodded once, like soldiers do when the map finally matches the terrain. We didn't talk about who would ask him what. We were two women with different rings and the same ache. He came home from work at 6 with a bouquet he pretended the florist had thrown in. Men still think flowers can argue with facts. He kissed her cheek and set the bag on the counter. He kissed my forehead like a son who thinks respect can close doors. He was extra gentle with every cupboard, extra careful with his words. Guilty people handle the world the way waiters handle trays stacked too high. At dinner, I told a story about Cardell's pharmacy. I said the name Clara on purpose and watched him react the way people do when a stranger says their middle name. A flicker, a swallow, a hand to the glass. The moment passed. He poured more water. The ice cracked like a small confession. I did not accuse him. I did not ask for his phone. I did not say the sentence every mother rehearses and hopes never to need. Tell me what you've done. I asked him about a client he'd mentioned last week, because sometimes you have to let a liar relax enough to bring the lie into the open where the light can see it. He told me about office politics, about a meeting scheduled and unscheduled, about the way traffic always seems to know when you are late. He did not tell me whose mouth had left a red echo on his collar. He did not tell me why my daughter-in-law's hands had shaken. He did not tell me why a dead woman's name had climbed out of my past and sat bold on a piece of cheap metal like a dare. That night, when the house went dark and polite, I took the collar and the cap and a small pair of scissors to the laundry room. I trimmed a thread where the stain had soaked deepest. I dropped the thread into a clean envelope and wrote the date across the flap with the steadiness I use to ice cakes when customers want their names spelled right. If there was a way to make a thread tell me the truth, I would find it. The world sells a kit for every doubt now. I am not ashamed to buy one. In bed, I tried to sleep the way a person does when she wants her dreams to do the thinking for her. My mind kept lining up years like receipts. Clara's bright mouth in my mirror as we got ready for a party where we didn't belong. The time she whispered she was late and laughed right after, like if she said it like a joke it would walk backwards. The Thursday she didn't answer my call, then Friday, then the call that wasn't from her at all. The service with lilies that made my eyes itch and an absence that made the room tilt. If she had lived, if she had slipped out of the life that had taught her to engrave her name on anything that loved her, what would she have kept? Not a suitcase. Not a diary. She would have kept the color. She would have kept the way it made men look softer and women stand taller. She would have kept the tube like a talisman and carved her name into the world until it knew not to misplace her again. When I woke before the alarm, the collar and the envelope and the laptop were right where I'd left them, like 3 stubborn children. I made toast, not because I was hungry but because butter is what you eat when the road ahead looks longer than your feet feel. The house warmed. The day did not. I asked my daughter-in-law to bring me the shirt from the hamper. She had already washed it twice. The stain had bled a little and then settled in, as if it had decided to be furniture. She apologized for trying to erase the thing I needed to see. I told her not to be sorry. Women have to survive long enough to learn what evidence looks like. Sometimes it looks like surrender. On the way to the bakery, I drove by Cardell's out of habit, even though it had been a dry cleaner's for 20 years. The new sign boasted same-day service if you brought your clothes before 11. I sat at the light and watched people carry their lives in plastic bags past a door that used to ring a bell for 2 girls who thought they owned red. A woman pushed a stroller across the crosswalk and turned her face from the sun. For a second she looked like someone I had loved when we were both dumb enough to think names stay where you put them. I parked behind the shop, unlocked the back and flipped the ovens on. Flour went into a bowl, water found it, salt made a promise. My hands remembered the way to gather and turn, gather and turn. Dough talks if you listen. It said be patient the way old friends say be kind when they know you're out of kindness. While the first batch rose, I opened the laptop again and made a new search. CL Designs retailer list. None. Contact. A form that didn't ask for a name. I wrote one anyway. I'm looking for a discontinued shade from the Cardell's line. I believe you reproduce it. Do you engrave names? I'm searching for a piece of the past. I will pay whatever you ask if you can tell me where this color came from. I didn't sign my name. Some stories need to hear themselves echo in a different voice before they come forward. By mid-morning the phone on the wall blinked with orders and complaints and congratulations people give when your bread pulls on the right kind of memory. I worked with my sleeves rolled and my jaw set, and the part of me that remembers funeral flowers pressed hard against the part of me that still knows how to laugh at a bad joke. The bell over the front door chimed a rhythm I've known since we traded a couch for a mixer and a dream. At noon, a single email replied. No greeting. No signature. Just 6 words. We engrave for family. Pick up by appointment. And an address in a part of the city where old warehouses become new ideas. Family. The word sat in the middle of the sentence and refused to share space. I closed the laptop and wiped my hands until flour stopped pretending to be snow. I took the envelope with the thread and slid it into my purse. I put the stained collar in a plain brown bag. I locked the bakery and told my staff I needed the kind of errand owners take when something outside the kitchen demands their name. I didn't know yet whether I was driving toward Clara or away from her. I only knew that whatever waited at that address had found a way to take a dead woman's color and teach it to climb onto a shirt in my house. If there was a story hiding inside 6 careful words and a red that shouldn't exist, I would walk into it with my head up. And if the door that opened belonged to someone who had my blood in her face, I would know it the way women know the truth before the world catches up. I put the car in gear and told the past to sit in the back, and keep quiet until I asked it a question. The light turned green. I went. The address sat in the kind of neighborhood where the city forgets to finish sentences. Brick warehouses with their windows bricked again, loading docks that still remembered the weight of crates, weeds making slow claims in concrete seams. My tires thumped over a seam, and the steering wheel hummed like a throat clearing. Number 17 had no sign, just a painted door the color of a kept secret. One brass buzzer below a camera that looked older than the century. I pressed. A delay. Footsteps. The lock clicked with the tired grace of an instrument that still knows its song. A woman opened the door halfway, and let her eyes do the rest. Early 30s, maybe. High cheekbones, mouth soft and decisive, hair pulled back like she had better things to do than let it escape. Up close, the past is rude. Features where they shouldn't be, gestures you remember from a face that isn't here to make them. For a second I forgot my sentence. Then the room behind her breathed perfume and wax and heat, and I remembered why I had come. Pick up, she asked. Appointment, I said, because 6 words in an email don't leave you much else. She stepped back and the room widened. Metal tables, small burners, shallow pans, rows of empty tubes and trays like soldiers off duty. On one wall, a pegboard held tiny engraving tools lined like silver punctuation. The air was warm with the sugar-slick smell of lipstick before it becomes a mouth. You wrote about Cardell's, she said, closing the door behind me. I wrote about a red that isn't supposed to exist. She didn't flinch. She moved to a table, picked up a clipboard, checked a box. We replicate discontinued formulas, she said. Color matching. Custom engraving. It helps women keep what the market takes away. Do you engrave names? I asked, knowing the answer, needing to hear it land in the room where it happened. Yes. Family only. The word slid between us the way a blade slides between cake layers. Clean practiced, leaving a neat line. I took the brown bag from my purse and set it gently on the table. Inside, the collar. I slid it out. The stain stared up like a wound trying to be polite. She leaned in, took one breath, and reached for a loop. Up close, the color was even ruder, brazen, certain, familiar. She nodded once, as if agreeing with herself. You know this shade? She asked. I wore it when I was foolish, I said. My friend wore it when she was brave. It was hers first. Her name. She didn't ask like a clerk. She asked like a locksmith. I let the syllables out slow. Clara. Something in her face flickered. The kind of tiny storm you miss if you blink. She set the loop down. We can match it, she said. We've matched it before. She turned to the engraving tray and pulled a practice cap from a drawer. And we can engrave. I sat in the chair she hadn't offered and watched the way her hands moved. Clean. Sure. Hands that have made small, exact promises to strangers. On the wall above the tools hung a single framed photograph, a hand holding a lipstick tube, the cap engraved in thin cursive, light catching on the tail of an R like a hook in water. Who taught you to do that script? I asked. My mother, she said, and the word tilted the room. She kept her eyes on her work. She said the world likes its initials loud and its names lost. So we put the names back. Your mother's name? I made my voice a stranger's. Lena. She set down the cap. Lena Weston. I didn't let the recognition show itself all at once. Weston. The name I'd seen in my son's call log with the initials torn down to bone, L. Weston. The maiden name Clara wore before she learned what taking someone's last name can cost. Is Lena here? I asked. She passed, the woman said, but there was no grief in it. Just a ledger balanced. Years ago. The room felt a little smaller, or my lungs did. I'm sorry. She trained me well, the woman said, and the certainty in her voice made me understand that the sorry was irrelevant. She lifted the stained collar again, held it under better light, and pointed to a faint glitter edge where the red had met metal. Old formula, she murmured. You can always tell by the mica. Modern labs don't spend mica like this. Can you tell me who ordered it? I asked. Who had you engrave her name? She looked up and finally really looked at me. We don't release client information, she said. Family only. I might be family, I said. It was the first time I had let the thought take its full height. She studied me. Eyes, mouth, the way a person waits at the end of a question. How? My friend, I said. Clara. We grew up together. She disappeared. I let the sentence stay kind. If she had a child, she would be your age. The woman's jaw moved once like a door testing a latch. She reached under the table, pulled out a small velvet roll, and unwrapped it. Inside lay 3 caps, engraved, practice pieces or mementos, the old Cardell's cursive done with reverence. She lined them in a row, Lena, Weston, and one more she kept her hand on as if it were warm. And the third? I asked. She moved her hand. Clara. I stared until the room softened around the edges. Your mother taught you the script, I said again, but this time the word mother meant 2 women at once. She taught me the shape of names, she said, and how to hide in plain sight. I wanted to ask 100 questions and none. I wanted to say I loved her and I hated her, and we were children, and we were not. Instead, I folded my hands and remembered my place. When the past shows up to speak, you let it finish. How did you get the Cardell's formula? I asked softly. My mother saved things, she said, with a small smile that didn't reach the part of her face that belonged to me. Old labels, ingredient cards, ratios and margins. She said love is a recipe, measure heat time. Then she said some recipes you burn on purpose. So she was alive, I said, less a question than an apology to the girl I had been who stood at a coffin and believed the world because it wore black and kept its voice low. She was alive, the woman said, giving me the dignity of the present tense before she took it back. For a long time. Quietly. Why Clara on the cap? I asked, and my voice cracked on her name like a boned fish. She engraved a few for herself, the woman said. For courage. She shrugged, and the gesture was so much her mother's that I looked away. And she engraved one when she needed to tell the truth without saying it. To whom? The woman worked her jaw like the answer had teeth. To a man who owed her more than flowers. She glanced at the collar. Men understand names when they see them on their own clothes. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. Do you know who brought you this one? I asked. Who had you engrave Clara, recently? She set the collar down and wiped her hands, even though there was nothing on them. A man ordered it, she said. He paid cash. He didn't give a name, but his shirt tag showed when he leaned. And my mother taught me to read without staring. She walked to a small file box, flipped past index cards, pulled one out. Sometimes I write details so I can sleep. She read, gray suit. Bakery flour on cuff. Smells like vanilla. Laughs too quickly. Says ma'am to buy time. Wedding ring removed and returned twice during order. She looked up. He brought a shirt for color match. White good cotton. He had a stain there already, like the cap had done its work. He wanted the font exact. He said he needed to prove something. My mouth went dry. Flour on cuff. Vanilla. There are 1,000 bakeries. But there is only one man who still says ma'am to women his mother's age when he is nervous. Did he give you a name at all? I asked, careful with the pronoun because my tongue knew how to lie to me if I let it. She shook her head. Only details. He asked if we could backdate a receipt. I declined. She pushed the card toward me across the table, as if it were heavy. It wasn't. Paper rarely is until you know what it's carrying. I read it once. Twice. On the back in smaller writing. He said my mother will understand, like a prayer or a threat. He held the cap too long. He looked like he had been waiting for a door to open for years, and was terrified of what was on the other side. I knew that posture. I had ironed its shirts. I had taught it to tie a tie. Why family only? I asked, because the rule had become a cord we both kept plucking. Why that line? She touched the engraving pen with a finger the way believers touch relics. Because a stranger's name doesn't belong on a mouth, she said simply. Because women deserve to carry their own. I stood. My legs were solid and far away. I need one, I said. The exact shade. The exact engraving. Whose name? She asked. Mine, I said. And hers. I paused. Side by side. Something like weather moved across her face. Sunlight through a quick cloud. That would be unusual. So is what we're doing, I said. She nodded, and the nod was in agreement with more than me. She pulled a tray, prepped a mold, tested the pigment against a card until the red looked like the kind of trouble you make on purpose. While it cooled, she set 2 caps in the vise and traced the thin cursive with the kind of care a person learns when they've watched names be taken. Juliet. Clara. The letters were sisters again for the first time in years. When she pressed them into my palm, they were still warm. I felt the weight of a tube that had no right to exist and every right to come home. What did your mother keep besides recipes? I asked at the door, because the question had stood beside me the whole visit like a quiet friend. She considered, then walked to a drawer and brought out a small envelope, yellowed corner soft. She held it up, then held it back. She said to give this to the woman who came asking for a color she shouldn't remember. How did she know I would come? My voice sounded like someone else's patience. She said grief circles, the woman answered. And truth keeps appointments. I took the envelope. It was light. Too light for regret, just right for instruction. On the flap, in a handwriting that still knew how to make a flourish with a wrist that had told me secrets in bathrooms and hallways and small cars, someone had written my name. Not Mrs., not Mother, not the thing men and children call you when they need you to stand in a certain spot. My name. Juliet. I didn't open it there. Some doors you don't open in public. I slipped it into my purse and thanked her with the kind of nod women share when they can't afford to cry where men might see them. Family only, she said again, softer now, not a rule but a benediction. Then I'll be back, I said. Because I think we are. Outside, the light had shifted just enough to make the brick look kind. I sat in my car and held the 2 lipsticks in my hand. One for a woman I had loved and lost, one for the woman I still was, despite all the names I had worn since. In the rear view, my face looked older than it had that morning and steadier than it had yesterday. I opened the envelope with my thumbnail and slid out a single index card. For words in Clara's hand, unadorned, true as a recipe. He wasn't yours either. I sat very still and let the sentence take the room it needed. Then I started the engine and pointed my car toward the part of town where boys learn to be men and forget to tell their mothers when the lesson goes crooked. My phone buzzed in my bag. A message from my son, running late. Don't wait. I smiled at the red light that had the grace to hold me a minute longer. I wasn't waiting. I was arriving. That night the bakery hummed with the small noises only I hear. The mixer sighing as it cooled, the freezer door clicking into sleep. I stayed late because the ovens don't ask questions. My phone buzzed once, a message from my son, running late. Don't wait. Another echo of the morning's text. Repetition means comfort or rehearsal. I didn't know which. I scrolled through our thread and stopped at an older audio icon. Sent at 11:47 p.m. a week ago, marked deleted by user. But my phone keeps backups. Mothers don't delete anything by accident. I pressed play. A voice filled the small kitchen. His voice, tired, low, careful. Hey, I can't talk long. I'll tell you tomorrow. She's asking questions. If she finds out, it's over. I think she already knows. Don't call until I say, we'll fix this. Then another voice, a woman's, whispering close enough to the mic that her breath hit the speaker. She won't find out. She's too kind to look properly. Not my daughter-in-law. Softer, younger, deliberate. A voice that sounded like it belonged to a person who thought she had time. I replayed it 3 times. The laugh at the end, barely there, was Clara's laugh slowed down, or someone raised on the rhythm of it. I sat very still and watched the security light outside blink its steady Morse. In the morning I called the lab, the one that processed the thread sample. Can you run another comparison? I asked. With what sample? Hairbrush, I said. And if you can add an extra profile, my son's. By afternoon, a reply came, 99% kinship match. Maternal half. I printed it and folded it once clean. When he came home that evening, he found me on the porch. I asked, "Who is L. Weston?" He froze just long enough to tell me he knew the name. Then he smiled the way guilty men think charm can translate to amnesia. "Work client," he said. "Then you shouldn't whisper to clients at midnight," I answered. He walked past me, the air dragging his guilt inside with him. I went to his car while he showered. His phone dock flashed with a missed call. The screen name read L. Weston. I pressed the number, saved it to mine, and texted 3 words. "Who are you?" A minute later, an answer arrived. The one who finally told him the truth. No punctuación. No fear. Just certainty. I stared at the message until the streetlight cut it in half. Then I whispered to no one. "You always had perfect timing, Clara." The morning started with the kind of quiet that means the house is holding its breath. I moved through it carefully like a guest in my own life. The coffee tasted like ash, the paper like noise. The lab envelope sat where I'd left it the night before, beside the flour canister, between habit and confession. I didn't open it right away. Paper like that has gravity. Once you read what it says, your blood can't go back to pretending. But curiosity is a kind of hunger, and hunger always wins. I slit the envelope, pulled out the sheet, and read it once fast, then again slow enough for the letters to rearrange into meaning. 99% probability of maternal half relation. My son's DNA and the hair sample from the lipstick cap. Same bloodline, same mother. Mine. I stood there with my hand flat on the counter. The tiles felt colder than the morning. The voice message kept replaying in my mind. "She's too kind to look properly." Maybe they were right. I hadn't looked properly in years. I'd looked gently. The way mothers are taught to, enough to believe, not enough to know. I reached for the second envelope, the one with my husband's old things. His comb, his watch, the cufflinks he left me in a box labeled "Always Yours." I laughed once sharp. Men like him always promise always when they mean until. I took the comb, pulled a hair from the bristle, and sealed it into a new bag. Sent it to the same lab with no note. I just wrote, "Compare all 3. That evening, my son came home earlier than usual. He smelled like borrowed cologne and someone else's nerves. He kissed my cheek and said, 'Mom, you look tired.' I smiled because lies deserve a mirror. He sat down at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to be waiting for something. When it rang, he jumped. The name flashed across the screen. L. Weston. He silenced it fast, but I'd already seen it. "She's persistent," I said. He looked up, startled. Whoever Weston is." He swallowed once. "A supplier. Just business." "Business doesn't sound like that," I said, and his face changed, the way a storm changes sky before it hits. He pushed the chair back hard enough that it scraped the tile. "I don't have to explain everything to you." "You don't," I said softly. "But one day you will wish you had." He left without his keys. The sound of the door shutting was heavier than anger. It was history repeating itself. Hours later, the lab called. "Mrs. Carter? We have your comparative results." "Go on," I said, though my body already knew. "The female hair matches your DNA closely. 99% probable maternal relation. The male sample, however, shows no paternal relation to your son." I let the words settle in. Not my husband's blood. Not his legacy. A second silence followed, the kind that only comes when the world quietly rearranges itself. I thanked the technician, hung up, and sat there with both results spread across the table, like 2 mirrors facing each other, multiplying my reflection into infinity. Clara hadn't just disappeared. She had left behind a secret. And my son, my beautiful foolish boy, had fallen in love with the woman carrying it. I looked at the lipstick tube again. Its name, its color, its curse. Clara's red. The dead don't haunt the living. We do it to ourselves. That night, before bed, I placed both reports into the box labeled Always Yours. Then I crossed out the word always. Tomorrow, I would find out where Weston lived. And maybe, for the first time in 40 years, I would finally look properly. The map led me across town, past the bakery's familiar streets into a neighborhood that smelled of rain and first chances. Small houses lined the road, old wood, peeling paint, curtains drawn halfway like people who still wanted to believe in privacy. The name on the mailbox was Weston, carved deep into the metal as if the letters had fought to stay. I parked across the street and watched for a while. Watching teaches you more than knocking ever does. The front window flickered with soft yellow light. A shadow passed, her silhouette slender but deliberate. The way she moved, careful, elegant, like someone raised by ghosts. I told myself I wasn't going to knock. I was just going to look. Just confirm what I already knew. But the truth has a way of pulling you toward it, like a string wrapped around your ribs. I stepped out of the car and crossed the street. Every footstep felt heavier than the one before it. When the door opened, she didn't look surprised. That was the first thing. She looked like she'd been expecting me. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked softly. Her voice carried the calm of someone who'd already rehearsed this moment. "Yes," I said, my throat dry. "You're Weston." She nodded. Up close, her face was a portrait of memory painted with new colors. She had Clara's cheekbones, sharp and kind at once. Her eyes, though, were mine. That startled me more than anything. "Please," she said. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of wax and rosewater, the same way Clara's used to. There were pictures on the mantel, old, grainy photographs of women who looked like both of us. I didn't know their names, but I recognized their sorrow. "I suppose you've guessed," she said quietly, handing me a cup of tea. "Clara was my mother." I didn't answer. I was afraid my voice would sound like guilt. "She told me about you," she continued. "Not everything. Just enough. Said you were the only person she ever trusted, and the only one who could destroy her." That sentence landed like a stone in a calm lake. "She's alive," I whispered. She shook her head. "No. Not anymore. She passed 5 years ago." "How?" "She called it a quiet ending. She left me her shop, her recipe, her rules." "And the lipstick?" I asked. "That was hers. The one you saw on the collar. She made it herself before she died. Engraved it for closure." "Closure?" I echoed. "She wanted me to find him," she said. "To know what kind of man my father was. But I didn't expect." Her voice cracked just once. "I didn't expect to fall for his son." I gripped the armrest, steadying the world. "You didn't know?" She shook her head, tears finding their place on her cheeks. "No. Not until I saw your family photo in his office. The same eyes, the same smile. I tried to end it, but he wouldn't let go. He said he felt like he'd known me all his life. And maybe he had, in a way neither of us understood." The room seemed to shrink, filled with all the air I couldn't breathe. "I wanted to tell him," she said. "But then you came. I thought maybe fate was doing the talking for me." I looked at her, at Clara's ghost made flesh, and for a moment, I didn't see betrayal or shame. I saw the consequence of secrets women were forced to carry for men who never did the same. "My husband," I said finally. "He was your father." She nodded once. "He didn't deserve either of you. We sat there, 2 generations of the same mistake, bound by the same man." "I don't know how to fix this," I whispered. "You can't," she said simply. "But maybe you can stop it from happening again." When I left, she handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a single lipstick, unmarked, no name. "She made this one for you," she said. "Said you'd know when to wear it." The color was the same, Clara's red. Only softer, warmer. Forgiveness in pigment form. I drove home as the sky turned the same shade as that lipstick, crimson fading to quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I just felt inherited. That night, I wrote a note to my son. "There are things you need to know. But not tonight. Sleep while you still can. Then I placed the lipstick beside Clara's old photograph on my dresser. 2 names, 2 women, 1 history, finally breathing the same air. I woke before dawn. The kind of wake that comes from the heart, not the clock. The house was still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I sat by the window and watched the dark turn gray, wondering how truth always feels heavier in the morning. When I heard his car pull into the driveway, I didn't move. He tried the door quietly, like someone testing forgiveness. I let him think I was asleep. But guilt has a sound. Shoes soft, breath careful. Every step pretending not to exist. He didn't come to my room. He went straight to the study. That's where men hide when they think silence can build them a wall. After half an hour, I walked in. No words, just stood in the doorway. He was staring at his laptop, the same photo of a woman on the screen. Weston. My son didn't even close it. He just looked up at me, eyes red, mouth heavy with a truth he couldn't carry anymore. Mom, he said. Before you say anything, please listen. I nodded. He rubbed his face like he could wipe away whatever he'd done. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't even know who she was when I met her. She came to my firm as a client. Her mother had passed and left some kind of property paperwork. She said she needed help sorting it out. Clara, I said quietly. His head jerked up. You knew. I always knew more than I said. He looked down again. I just wanted to help. But she was different. Not like anyone else. It felt like I'd known her forever. Like she already understood things about me I'd never said out loud. Because she did, I said. He didn't understand yet, not fully. So I let him keep speaking. One night she told me her mother's name, he went on. Said she'd disappeared a long time ago. Clara Weston. I told her my father once mentioned knowing someone by that name when he was younger. She laughed, said maybe we were connected somehow. My chest tightened. And that didn't make you stop? He swallowed hard. I didn't think she meant like that, Mom. We joked about it. But the more I learned, the more I realized she was the kind of person you don't meet twice. I told myself it was coincidence. Coincidence doesn't engrave names, I said. He froze. The color drained from his face. Where did you hear about that? She showed me. I lied. And the stain you brought home told me the rest. He stood then, hands gripping the edge of the desk. I didn't cheat, he said. At least, not the way she thinks. I didn't touch her after I found out who she really was. When did you find out? He looked away. 2 weeks ago. The day I got the DNA results back. I blinked. You tested it too? He nodded. I had a feeling. She looked too much like you, Mom. I had to know. And what did you do after that? He sighed, every bone in his body tired. I tried to end it. But she said she needed to hear the truth from you. Said you were the only one who could untangle it. She left a note for me. Just 2 words, ask her. I closed my eyes. The past doesn't die, it just changes handwriting. He walked toward me then, slower than a child approaching punishment. Is it true, he asked. Did Dad, was she really? Yes, I said. The word came out small. Your father and Clara were together long before I knew. You and she share blood that shouldn't have crossed paths again. He sat down hard on the couch, covering his face. God. I wanted to go to him, but my feet stayed still. Sometimes love holds its ground so pain can't spread. She didn't know either, I said. Don't punish her for that. He laughed, short and broken. What does that make me, Mom? A fool? A monster? No, I said gently. It makes you my son. And it makes both of you as survivors of a story written by someone who's already gone. He looked up then, eyes wet but clear. What do I do now? End it quietly, I said. With kindness. Don't make her carry more shame than she already does. And when you tell your wife, tell her everything. Lies rot in the walls. And this house has enough ghosts already. He nodded slowly, then reached for my hand. You knew this was coming, didn't you? I knew something was, I said. The past always finds a way home. We sat like that until the light changed, until it was morning again, and the world remembered how to move. When he finally left, he turned at the door. Mom. Yes. She said you'd understand. I smiled faintly. I always did. After he drove away, I walked to my dresser and opened the drawer. The lipstick lay there, waiting, its color deep as a promise. I held it up to the light and whispered, Clara, your children found each other. Not the way we planned, but they did. Then I set it down beside the velvet pouch and closed the drawer. The sound it made was soft, like a heart deciding it had done enough breaking for one lifetime. I waited 3 days before doing anything. 3 days of silence. Not peace, just the kind that feels like someone is winding a clock behind your ribs. My son went to work every morning, eyes hollow, voice too polite. My daughter-in-law tried to pretend normal, but normal had packed its bags. On the 4th morning, I made a decision. You can't let secrets fester. They ferment. They turn every room sour. So I called her, the woman carrying my dead friend's name in her blood. She answered after one ring. Mrs. Carter? Yes, I said. Would you have lunch with me? Lunch? She repeated, startled. At the bakery, I said. Tomorrow. I'll be there at 1. Please come. There was a pause, soft as a breath. Then, all right. I spent that evening baking bread the way I used to when my husband still came home smelling like work instead of excuses. The rhythm steadied me, knead, turn, fold, rise. Sometimes faith is just muscle memory. At 1 o'clock sharp she came. Plain blouse, hair pinned back, no makeup except the faintest red tint, Clara's red, softened by age or mercy. When she walked through the door, the chatter in the cafe lowered itself. She looked so much like the woman I had buried that for a heartbeat, I thought I was seeing a ghost with better posture. I gestured to a table near the window. Seat. She did. Hands in her lap. Shoulders tense but dignified. For a moment we said nothing. The air filled the space between us, full of history and perfume that wasn't really there. I know everything now, I said finally. About your mother. About you. She nodded slowly. And about him? My son, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Yes. He told me. She looked down. He didn't know. I know, I said. Neither did you. That's why I asked you here. To stop the bleeding before it becomes another wound we pretend to live with. Her eyes lifted, Clara's eyes, but softer, older somehow. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. You're the echo of someone I once loved and someone I once envied. Hate doesn't fit anywhere in that. She exhaled, shoulders lowering a little. She wanted to tell you, you know. My mother. She wrote you letters she never sent. Did she? Yes. She said she wished you'd both chosen honesty instead of silence. I looked at my hands. The hands that had baked bread for men who never said thank you. The hands that buried a friend and raised her son's mistake. We were young, I said. We thought the truth was something you could schedule. She forgave you, she said gently. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Then she was kinder than I was. We sat for a while, just listening to the sound of forks and soft laughter from other tables. Lives untouched by ours. Finally, she reached into her purse and placed a small box on the table. I found this among her things, she said. Inside was an old photograph. Clara and me, 20 years old, red lipstick on both our mouths, arms around each other like sisters. On the back, in Clara's handwriting, for Juliet. Because love and regret were the same shade. I closed the box. Thank you, I said. She would have wanted you to have it, she said quietly. I leaned forward. Promise me something. She met my eyes. Anything. Leave my son. Not out of guilt. Out of mercy. Let him learn how to live without repeating us. Tears gathered but didn't fall. I already did, she said. He deserves a clean story. And you? I asked. I'll build my own. She stood and I did too. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two women who had both inherited the same storm and decided not to pass it on. As she turned to leave, I called out softly, "You look like her." She smiled. "So do you." After she left, I locked the front door and sat back down. The seat still held her warmth. On the table was a napkin she'd used. On it, a faint red mark, her lipstick. I touched it with my finger and whispered, "The color survived us all." Then I folded the napkin carefully and placed it in my pocket. Not as evidence. As proof that forgiveness, too, leaves a stain. The next morning felt lighter, like the house had exhaled during the night. For the first time in weeks, there was no silence pretending to be peace. I opened the windows, let in a bit of air that didn't know any of our secrets. Then the phone rang. A voice I didn't expect. "Mrs. Carter? It's her. Lena. I know you asked me to stay away, but I think you should come." Her tone was calm, but underneath was something brittle, like glass holding too much weight. "Where?" I asked. "My mother's old shop," she said. "I found something. I think it's meant for you." The address took me back to that forgotten warehouse. The street was the same, tired buildings and rusted signs, the smell of rain and metal. But this time, sunlight touched the brick like forgiveness. She was waiting outside, holding a box no bigger than a loaf of bread. "I found this in the back room," she said, "hidden under a false floorboard. I think my mother wanted you to find it." We went inside. Dust and light floated together in the air like two things that didn't know how to part. She set the box on the table. "Open it." I did. Inside were photographs, old faded, edges curling like petals. Most were of us. Me, Clara, her husband. Our smiles so wide you'd never guess what shadows were standing just out of frame. Then one photo stopped me. It wasn't old. It was recent. It showed my son standing in front of a brick wall. This brick wall, next to Lena. They weren't holding hands, but the closeness said enough. And behind them on the wall, a faint painted logo read, "CL Designs." I turned the photo over. On the back, in Clara's familiar handwriting, "He found her. You'll know what to do when you see this." I looked up at Lena. "Where did this come from?" "It was taken the day before she died," she said softly. "She had the camera developed herself. She said she wanted to leave proof that the truth always meets itself in the end." "She planned this," I whispered. "Every piece of it. Even the lipstick." Lena nodded. She knew one day someone would find the color again. She just didn't know it would be us. I held the photo up to the light. Behind my son, faintly on the wall, there was something else, writing beneath the logo, half scrubbed by age. I leaned closer, heart racing. "CL Designs, family only." Family. The word that had chased me from one generation to the next, changing faces but never meaning. I laughed then, a small sound that wasn't joy, just relief. "She wasn't haunting me," I said. "She was guiding me back." Lena smiled, a tired, knowing smile. "Maybe she just wanted you to finish the story she couldn't." I nodded. "I will." She walked me to the door. "What will you tell him? Your son?" "The truth," I said. "But gently. Some truths bruise if you drop them too fast." That evening I called him. "Come home," I said. "Alone." When he arrived, I handed him the photo. "This is your real inheritance," I told him. He stared at it for a long time, tracing the lines with his thumb. "She looks like her," he whispered. "And like you." "She is," I said. "Both of us. What's broken doesn't always end. Sometimes it changes shape." He didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, "What do I do with this?" "Learn from it," I said. "And never give anyone else a reason to leave their name on another person's sorrow." He nodded, eyes shining. "You forgive her?" "Yes," I said. "And I forgive myself." He smiled faintly, that small boy still living behind the man. "You always knew how to clean up my messes." I laughed softly. "Not this time, son. This time you helped me finish hers." After he left, I placed the photo on the mantel beside the lipstick, and the note Clara had written me years ago. 3 generations, one story, finally at rest. The light from the lamp caught the glass just right, and for a second, I swear I saw Clara's reflection standing behind me. Same red mouth, same soft defiance. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because for the first time since that stain appeared on a collar, I wasn't chasing the past. The past had come home. The next morning came with rain, soft, steady, like the sky was rinsing the last traces of denial off everything it touched. I sat by the kitchen window. The photo and Clara's letter spread out before me. The lipstick stood between them like a seal between worlds. There were no more questions. Only the weight of answers I hadn't wanted but somehow needed. When my son came downstairs, his hair still damp from the shower, he looked different, older, quieter, like he'd finally heard the echo of every lie we'd lived under. "Sit," I said. He obeyed without a word. I pushed the letter across the table. "Read." He unfolded it carefully, scanning Clara's handwriting. Those looping C's and sharp L's I could recognize anywhere. "Juliet, if this ever reaches you, it means I failed to keep the secret long enough for it to stop hurting anyone. I didn't die when I said I did. I ran. Because your husband, our husband, wouldn't let me raise the child in peace. He promised to choose me, then chose convenience. You deserved better, but so did I. The child I carried was his. The one you carried was yours. They were both his sons. The world would never forgive that truth, so I buried it with my name." He looked up, pale. "Sons?" "Yes," I said. "You had a brother. Not just a sister through Clara. A brother, too. One who never made it past his first breath." I could still hear the memory, even now, Clara crying in that hospital room, whispering he'll never know. I had held her hand that night. I didn't know the child's father was mine, too. "She left you both," I said softly. "She thought disappearing would break the curse. But she didn't realize the past has children of its own." He leaned back, running both hands over his face. "So everything we've lived, all this pain, was inheritance," I said. "We just didn't know what we were spending." The clock ticked. Outside, thunder rolled softly like someone dragging a chair across heaven. He looked at me again, tears building. "What happens now?" I thought about that for a long time. Now we stop pretending history is something we can outrun. We name it. We forgive it. And then we let it go. He laughed, broken, hollow. "Forgive Dad? After everything?" "No," I said. "Not him. Ourselves. Forgive the versions of us that believed him." He nodded slowly, almost grateful to have instructions for grief. Then I reached into the drawer and took out a second envelope. One Clara must have written later, addressed not to me, but to Lena. "Take this to her," I said. "Don't read it. Don't add anything. Just give it to her." He hesitated. "You trust her?" "I trust what's left of your father's mistakes. They've already done enough damage. Maybe now they'll fix something." He stood, tucking the envelope inside his jacket. "And if she doesn't forgive me? Then forgive her first," I said. "That's how the curse breaks." He kissed my forehead before leaving. The first kiss that didn't feel like a son begging for approval, but like a man saying thank you. When he was gone, I cleaned the table, folded the letter, and placed it inside the wooden box labeled family only. Then I took the lipstick and for the first time opened it. The color was still perfect, deep red, warm, defiant. The same shade that had started everything. I applied it slowly, staring at the reflection of a woman who had survived too much to care about judgment anymore. "You win, Clara," I whispered. "Your color never died." Rain softened to drizzle outside. The air smelled like new beginnings pretending to be endings. I put the lipstick back on the table, next to the letter, next to the truth. And for the first time in decades, the house didn't feel haunted. It just felt honest. It had been a week since my son delivered Clara's letter to Lena. He didn't tell me what it said, and I didn't ask. Some truths aren't meant to be shared. They're meant to be carried until they fade into forgiveness. But on the 8th day, just as I was closing the bakery, the bell over the door chimed. She stood there, Lena, drenched from the rain, holding a paper bag wrapped carefully in both hands. Her face was calmer than before. The storm inside her had passed, but the wind had left its mark. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, locking the door behind her. She placed the bag on the counter and unwrapped it. Inside was a small glass jar, half filled with crimson pigment, the same red that had followed us through decades. "I finished it," she said quietly. "The last batch my mother started before she died. She said it was meant for you. She called it the final shade." I stared at it, the color deep and alive even in the dim light. "What makes it final?" "She said it doesn't fade," Lena replied. "No matter what it touches, fabric, skin, paper, it stays. She wanted you to have something that time couldn't erase." I smiled faintly. That sounds like her. We sat together, two women separated by years and secrets, but connected by something more binding than blood, understanding. "She told me something else in her letter," Lena said. "She said the reason she ran wasn't just fear. She said she wanted you to have the life she couldn't live. That every lie she told was a way of loving you wrong, but loving you still." The words landed gently, like forgiveness disguised as confession. "I used to think love was supposed to be clean," I said. "But now I think it's supposed to survive dirt." Lena smiled through her tears. "Maybe that's why it's red." We both laughed softly, not out of joy, but release. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Your son wanted me to give you this." It was a note, short, written in his hurried handwriting. "Mom, she forgave me. I'm leaving town for a while. Need to start over, away from the noise. Don't worry. I'll call. Thank you for showing me what forgiveness looks like. You were right. Love isn't perfect, but it's still worth saving." I held the note against my chest. "He's finally growing up." Lena nodded. "He said you gave him the courage to walk toward his truth." I took her hand gently. "And you gave him the reason." She smiled, tired but free. "Do you think we'll ever stop paying for their choices?" "No," I said. "But we can stop collecting the receipts." We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the rain. When she stood to leave, I stopped her. "Wait." I opened the small jar of pigment, dipped my fingertip into the red, and marked a single line on her wrist, faint but bright. "Now," I said. "You carry it too." She looked down at the streak, her eyes shining. "Family only," she whispered. "Family always," I corrected. Then she walked out into the rain, the red mark glowing like a promise under the gray sky. I watched her go until the streetlight swallowed her figure, then turned the sign on the door to closed. Behind me, the jar sat on the counter, its lid glinting gold in the dim light. The storm had finally passed, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't afraid of the color red. I kept the jar on the kitchen table for a week like a small sun that only rose when I took off the lid. Morning light would touch it and turn the room the color of memory. Evening would settle, and it would glow like a coal that refused to go out. Life went back to its chores. Bread rose. Customers argued kindly over the last cinnamon roll. The house timed its creaks to the wind again. Some days I forgot to think about the past. Other days the past remembered me first. On the 8th morning I woke with a quiet certainty, the kind you can't explain but you recognize, like your own name spoken from the next room. I dressed in the soft navy I save for ordinary miracles, and set the jar beside the framed photo on the mantel. Two girls with red mouths, arms around each other like a promise we meant and failed and meant again. I wrote 3 notes. To my son, go where your voice sounds honest and stay there. To my daughter-in-law, you are blameless, heal loudly. To Lena, we are finished with inheritance. Build something new. I sealed them without flourish, the way you seal a room after it's been aired out. Then I unlocked the front door and opened every window. The house breathed. I took the jar to the dresser and set a small mirror against the lamp. Hands steady, I pressed a fingertip to the pigment. It clung, warm, patient. I drew a careful line across my mouth and watched a woman return to herself. Not the girl from Cardell's, not the wife at the funeral who wasn't allowed her real grief, not the mother counting stains on a collar, Just me. Juliet. I said the name out loud. It didn't echo. It landed. When I stepped outside, the air smelled like rain deciding whether to keep its promise. Neighbors waved the way people do when they only know your porch light. I walked 2 blocks to the small bridge where the creek runs even in August. Water doesn't hurry and it doesn't lie. It just carries what you give it to a larger truth. I opened the jar and held it to the light. It looked bottomless. Thank you, I said, to the girl who taught me red, to the woman who ran, to the daughter who came back, to the son who learned to leave gently. I tipped the jar. A single bright ribbon touched the surface and spread, then refused to fade, a thin stubborn vein of color moving forward without disappearing. Across the water a child laughed at nothing. Somewhere a train gave a low, patient horn. I put the lid on, lighter now, and realized that what remained was enough. It always had been. Back home, I placed the jar on the mantel between the photo and the napkin stain from our lunch. I added one more thing. The envelope that once read family only. I crossed out only and wrote always, the way you correct a recipe you used to get wrong. That evening, I made a small dinner and set a 3rd plate I didn't need. Old habits are ghosts you can be kind to. I ate slowly and let the clock keep time instead of score. When the porch light clicked on, I didn't think of watchers or witnesses. I thought of the way light returns to any place that stops refusing it. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of each room and said thank you. To the chair that held tall spines during hard conversations, to the table that learned the weight of facts, to the mirror that never told me I was anyone else. In the window, the glass carried back a woman with red lips and quiet eyes. She looked like truth in a dress that finally fit. I turned off the last lamp and the house settled around me, no secrets left between its walls. The night was gentle. So was I. If you ask me now what color forgiveness is, I'll tell you it's red. Not the loud kind that demands a room, but the steady kind that lingers after everyone leaves. The kind that won't wash out. Not because it stains, but because it belongs. I slept. And when morning came, I didn't reach for the jar first. I opened the window, and the day walked in uninvited and welcome. Home at last, no lies, no ghosts. Just my name, my breath, and a shade that stayed. Sometimes the truth isn't cruel, it's just late. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't ask for forgiveness. It just waits for you to see it. If this story stayed with you, if you felt that sting of memory and the warmth of forgiveness, hit subscribe and stay close. Because somewhere out there, another story is already waiting. And maybe it's yours. Until next time, this was Juliet's story. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more tales that touch the truth, one heart at a time.